Greetings, gamers. Jim here again. I know it's been a while since I've seen you. Things have just not been very good lately. I take care of my elderly mom, and things have been getting worse for her, unfortunately. In addition to that, I seem to have entered this year, 2022, being assaulted by furniture. I've had a bookshelf fall on me, a desk collapse on me because part of the frame just gave out even though it wasn't holding up an enormous amount of weight, um, it got pushed just the right way at just the wrong time, and it stressed it, and that collapsed. I've also slipped and fallen on nothing, just the air, because I'm not that agile individual anymore. I've gotten older, and so I don't rebound from those things quite as often. But today we're going to go back to gaming. We're going to talk about gaming and what's going on. I'm still working on stuff. Lots of little things in the background. I've been helping a friend as well, although not as quickly as I would like. But um, life has been kicking me quite a bit. So I do want to talk about some of the things I've gotten from either fulfilled Kickstarters or as gifts from friends. And that's not like somebody in the gaming industry gift. This is somebody who I just know as a gamer who thought I would like this game and got it for me. Starting out with, I'm going to talk about one of the field Kickstarters, which is Aurum. It is the post and I'm going to mispronounce this, even though I just looked it up. Apiosis, whatever, Apocentric space opera game. It's a beautiful game. It's well written. It's quite interesting. It takes African spirituality. My tongue is just not going to forgive me for making that mistake once. Um, and translates it into a science fiction game that is based on very much on African ideals, African, I mean, there's a lot of different. Africa's not just one country; it's a lot of countries, but there are tendencies. So there are crossover, of course, because you get that whenever you have a bunch of nations that are all together. But it is from many of the common spiritual beliefs that have been taken into a science fiction way for space opera. It has a bunch of rather unique non-human species that you can play. And I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce the names because I can't even get one of the words I just looked up properly to roll off my tongue. But there are the equivalent of humans. Although, uh, it has everything you expect it to have, which are, blasters and spaceships, sort of. Planets to explore, conflict. Although its system of attributes are actually called auras, and they're not quite as hard coded as a physical attribute like strength or agility would be in a game. Um, but the aliens are interesting. They are very unique in some ways, and a few of them are familiar. Example, there are the Alamanuro. I'm going to line up my camera on the new desk. It's not even, but your energy beings, not something we have never seen before. But then there are, plant species, um, semi insectoid or millipedal species. It's got feathers. I don't know what to call it. It's definitely not very bird-like. Um, Plant species again, but it's a fascinating game. It's incredibly well written. Excuse me, man. Sorry. Sorry for the interruption. My canine companion has decided that he needs to make trouble. Uh, anyway, but it's a fantastic game. It's a little oddly sized because this is a slipcase and a square book that goes in the slipcase. Um, and so it's not your traditional sized gaming book, but that's pretty common these days. We're getting more and more unique shapes from more landscape books and more just square books, small format books, zines. Zines have been taking off, which are little bitty short games that you might have once seen in print magazines, but since print magazines are kind of going away for a lot of hobbies and interests, you find them, these zine games are just little bitty short things you might have found in previous decades in those things that are just printed on their own in little booklets. There are quite a few interesting ones I've seen, but there are, of course, some that have no interest in. So it's one of those things. It's like there's something coming out or something that just came out or even came out a little while back that is for anyone, just very focused places. Oron has its own focus. It's focusing on something different than Western, European, American ideology in science fiction. Um, and I think that's fascinating to me because it's a unique take. It's not one that we've seen, that to me I've seen done before. And it sounds fun. It sounds interesting. And, I'm a white guy. So, I mean, any of my ancestry is pretty much all Northern European. And it's mostly the British Isles. There's a little bit of German and a little bit of Norwegian, but the rest is all British Isles almost. But it's a fascinating game. It's interesting, and it's not just a token. It embraces its creativity. I picked it up because I know several of the creators, um, and I respect their work in many other things. So I was interested in this when I started talking about it, and because I enjoy exploring other cultural ideas because I've spent 41 years playing role playing games. And in that 41 years, I've seen a lot of stuff. But a lot of that stuff was somewhat based on Western European ideals. And it's nice to see stuff that isn't. And there are some, there are even some that go back to the beginning, like Tecumel, and some that take that, embrace that, and mix it up, like Glorantha. Glorantha. Um, I can't pronounce anything today, so I was going to try and pronounce Apotheus. Yeah, I was trying to pronounce that, and it's just messed up all my pronunciations right now. And I just looked it up. I literally just went and played. What does this sound like pronounced? And I know the word. I know how it's pronounced, but I wanted to verify. Um, but no, my tongue is just going to disagree with me saying anything today. Just one more failure of my body, I guess, in interesting ways. Um, Next, I want to talk about a game, and this I don't want to be too negative about it, but this exemplifies why sometimes I think um, that there are people who have game ideas that should run them by game designers. And while I don't think the game is bad, I think it's actually pretty good for everything else. But it is a tendency I've noted in people who are artists first or something else first. I mean, I'm not saying somebody who writes novels can't write a game. I'm not saying somebody who's not a regular gamer can't write a game. I'm not saying anyone can't write a game, but I've just noticed that there's a tendency for these beautiful books, just absolutely stunning artwork books to come out. And then you look at the system, and the system looks like you're like, I'm not sure how this works. It happened years ago with a game called Alpha Omega. The system was incredibly, incredibly complex. And it turns out, I'm pretty sure that most of its creators were artists. They do not necessarily default to writers and game creators, which is fine. I mean, they may come up with something brilliant. But the game was so complicated because of I guess, what they expected the game to be. this is one reason why I like to take my games, even as a writer, and run them by a lot of people first. Run the ideas by them, play test them, run more ideas by them, play test them, and try and get them down to the most streamlined, most developed form that I possibly can. And this is not a bad game. I am not going to say one terribly negative word about this game, other than it has some complexity that puts it out of play with my particular group. That's it. It's just got some complexity that puts it out of play for my group, which is weird because we have played games that are a lot more complex than this. But it's just these days we don't spend that kind of time. And that's this. It's this book, this very robust, very beautiful book called Lancer. It is a mecha role playing game with art and creation by the creator of the 6 Million Demon comic, web comic. And it has their art, his art, uh, her art. I don't know. I really have not paid attention to the artist's name, and I should. Because, like I know comic book artists' name, and I know a lot of game artists, but when I'm reading web comics, I don't think about the artist much, and I really should, just the same way I think about comic book artists, and I didn't as a kid. But the art in this is fantastic. It's just absolutely fantastic. Trying to line up my webcam again, um, and it gives you a feel of very modern, very kind of alien at times aesthetic that you might find in some Japanese animation. Now, the tabletop role playing game aspects of this are really simple. They're simple rules, they work very well. But then you get into the mechanics of the mecha, running the mecha side of things. And the mecha side of things are complicated. They are quite complicated. Not so much so um, that they put them out of running for quite a few people. It doesn't necessarily put it out the running for me personally, but I know my group would balk at how complicated it is. They balk at one of my favorite mecha games, but the complication in that is the construction of mecha, and that's Mech Zeta. This one doesn't have mecha construction rules per se. Instead, it has technology that's unique between the companies, and you start out kind of a schlub, a beginning character with a generic mecha, and you earn the rights for different ways depending on the company, including one that just wants to seem to randomly go, oh, let's give it to that random guy over there. And they give you a license to access their better equipment, their better mecha, their upgrades. And as you level up your license with them, you improve your mecha, and you can, of course, swap out gear from any of these mecha that you have access to. There's nothing that won't work together. Um, and it's not a bad game. Do not mistake me at all. It's beautiful. It's interesting. It provides a lot of detail on running, the NPCs, because they're not like aliens you're fighting. You're just fighting other people for the most part. Um, and so it's human mecha versus human mecha, and it's a post scarcity game. So once you have access to the license to make a mecha, if yours gets completely destroyed, you can just get another one. There's literally no monetary cost involved. It's just you have permission to make one. Just go do it. And it's nice. It's fun. And I really wish I could get somebody to run this for me. Running it myself, I'm not sure about. I might someday. I hope I get the chance. But it's fairly traditionally sized, a little bit taller than normal. Um, but it is a very robust rule book. But a lot of that, I don't want to scare you off. A lot of that is because each mecha gives you the mecha, the picture of the mecha, which take up pretty much whole pages, and then upgrades to the mecha, which takes up a page. Not always a single page for every mecha and every upgrade, But for the 3 upgrades you're usually allowed to access with the licenses, it gives you some detail and explains how they work. And almost everything in it is somewhat unique for almost every mecha. Other than your starting mecha, which is, you're starting as a beginner, I guess, somebody new to the war. But it's a nice game. It's beautiful. It's well put together. It's a lovely book. I didn't say enough about Ordon on that, but Ordon is a gorgeous book. It's fairly what I expect from the creators involved. So it's, I guess, for me, that this coming out of a web comic artist, a very really creative, very unique web comic artist, is an important thing as well, because it's definitely got that artist's feel to the artwork, and it's high quality. Um, both are wonderful games. You should check them out. Now I come to my most recent, most wonderful release, and this is the one Kickstarter that finally fulfilled. It's Monster Care Squad. It's a little bit taller than most Light Lancer. It's not nearly as thick or uh, I don't want to say impressive, but it's not very intimidating. Um, Unlike the other 2 games, whose pages are slick, these have a very thick, almost parchment or maybe higher quality paper, which for me is kind of a sell. I mean, I don't mind them being not slick, because that's pretty much the common thing today is slick pages. But they're big, they're strong, and they are gorgeous. Um, and I mean, just the book has gorgeous background to it. And unlike the other 2 games, which take a lot of time describing systems, this game has a really simple system. Not that Orin is complicated. It's just 2 die 10 plus aura plus skill. Subtract the target number, get over a certain number, which means I think it's like 0. You have to get above a 0 on 2d10 plus this other stuff after you've determined how hard a task is and subtract it. So it's Orin is very like Palace Lonto 4th edition or Waste World, that kind of game, except it uses 2 die 10. And so it doesn't take a lot of space in terms of rules, but it details skills and stuff out, which takes more space. This doesn't. This has really, really, really very simple rules that don't take up a lot of the book. A lot of the book is locations, 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 backgrounds on various monsters that you go after, because it is Monster Care Squad, so the monsters are important. And the whole point of this is you basically play tactical combat veterinarians. You are a team of people who go out and capture a monster who you lived in peace with, but has been infected with this golden plague that makes them kind of not quite rabid, but dangerous. And it's your job to capture them and cure them of that plague and return them to the normal homeostasis of their being on good terms with you, because it's literally the major conflict in the game is taking care of monsters, helping them heal. There's not any conflicts, there's no wars, there's nothing else. That's the conflict. You might have social conflicts, arguments between the characters and stuff, the normal kind of stuff you expect. But that game feels to me like it could be inspiration or drawn inspiration from a Miyazaki film. Now, you've got to understand, when it comes to Japanese animation, Miyazaki is just fantastic. I mean, all of those movies are beautiful, wonderful, enjoyable things to me. Some of them, like Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, didn't make as much sense to me as the later ones, like Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away. But that game feels like it come from that same resource, in that it's hopeful, it teaches a lesson, it's creative, but it's kind of focuses on and I will say that even Miyazaki still talk about the dangers of war and the trouble of war. So this is even more peaceful than that, other than the fact that you have the conflict with the monsters. And that's not all monsters, that's whichever one is sick. But these are the three games I have gotten relatively recently. In the last year, two of them have come in relatively recently. I got Monster Care Squad last week. I got Oran a few weeks, maybe a month ago. But I literally forgot about it. I put it in a drawer. I read through it very carefully. And then I got busy with life and holidays and put it in a drawer to keep it protected because I'm not having the bookshelf anymore when that happened. And forgot about it. And then I went back after playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition and going, I really need a science fiction game that fills my heart. I went and picked up Oran again and started rereading it. Um, and you know, I mean, it's definitely Oran and Monster Care Squad are definitely more on my playlist than Lancer, but that's only because Lancer is kind of a war game uh, within it. I'm not saying I don't mind action or adventure or even conflict in a role playing game. I'm good with all of that. I just have a preference these days for one where it doesn't always turn out to be violence as a solution. And then Monster Care Squad has violence, it just has non lethal violence in it. Which is probably why I tend to want to play superhero games. Because I don't mind you punching out a bad guy as long as they're definitely a bad guy. But the real world isn't full of such black and white stuff. Then again, when I run a superhero game, you can't be guaranteed it's going to be black and white unless I've told you it is. Because sometimes the villains I come up with have complicated backstories that are actually sympathetic. Um, and that's the way I like the game. I like it to be a surprise. Um, Let me give you an example. I was running a Shadowrun game a few years ago. I'm running a Shadowrun game. And yeah, there's conflict in it. There's fights. There's lots of shooting and punching and running and stealing. And, you know, there's all the stuff you expect in Shadowrun. Um, uh, and some things you don't. For example, the player characters, I started them out at the rock bottom. They literally are finding a new place to live after the place they were squatting burned down. Except one player character who just would not get on board with that. And I'm like, dude, seriously, just get on board. But the player character just didn't seem to be wanted to be involved at all, even in the adventure. So he mostly slept and didn't do anything. And we're like, okay, fine. We'll play with the other people and your character can sleep. Because I'm not going to go to great lengths to wake your character up and drag them into the adventure. Either you have a motivation for you to go out and do stuff, or you don't. I'm not the one who provides that. That's player character stuff. Not that I won't give you a nudge or a kick, but in that Shadowrun game, I took time. I had the player characters had to infiltrate this really, really protected corporation. However, they had a really good hacker on their um, side, um, and by the name of Squirrel, and her the head of her little gang of hackers, and they got in with good identification, and were supposed to be temporary replacements for lost security personnel. And so I ran an entire game where the player characters really didn't fight anybody. They were there trying to get out secret information about the main bad guy out of its computers. And the computers were not on the net. You could not hack your way on there because it's a closed system. It doesn't have access to off-site communications because that makes it safe. And that's the best way to keep it safe is you literally have to physically go in, copy the drive, copy the information you need, and leave physically with the device or having put in a connection so you can hack it. While there, they were playing these security guards, and I exposed them to the inner lives of these security guards. Um, One of them was she just wanted to shoot somebody so bad because she's sitting here watching one of her high bosses having, like having a long-term relationship affair with one of the security guards, And she's frustrated because she's left watching the station while he goes off to do, shenanigans with the boss. And she's sitting there and she's getting sympathy from one of the player characters. And the player character's like, yeah, I understand. I do. And it's like, but I showed them these NPCs have rich interior lives. And it did somewhat impact the game. Now, sometimes they will run through an adventure and try and kill the guards or something. But in that circumstance, I made it so that they had to think about it. They had to make moral decisions. And they did. And, I know there are a lot of players that won't work with, but these players were like, we've got to get rid of this evil person. But we don't have to blow up the corporate building. We just have to take rid of her. And they did. They managed to get rid of her eventually at the end of the campaign. I would love to go back to that campaign. I'd probably update to the newest Shadowrun edition, 6E. That's just preference. I love 20th anniversary edition 4E, which is what I was using. I didn't care for 5E. There were some changes that just struck me the wrong way, but I like 6E. It seems to continue what 4E wanted to do. I also like Anarchy, but I don't care for the rotating GM part. It's just a really simple, stripped-down set of rules a GM can use, in my opinion. And that's probably what should have focused on for people who don't want more complex Shadowrun rules. But lately, I've been playing a lot of D&D. Yeah, I'm getting to the point where I'm drowning, and I just don't want to do it anymore. D&D is not very much my thing anymore. It's not, I won't ever be interested in it again. It's just right now, I want to play science fiction, superheroes, urban fantasy, horror, just anything but traditional fantasy. You want me to do Asian fantasy? Cool. You want me to do something else? Cool. But I just don't want to do Western interpretation. Sorry for all the quotes. It's old habit from being my age. Gen X, so, I have those old mannerisms. But I recommend all these games hardly. I recommend Orin, I recommend Lancer, I recommend Monster Care Squad. And despite a lot of negativity on the net, I recommend 6th edition of Shadowrun. Yes, it has a lot of errata, but let me be honest. There are a lot of games with a lot of errata that for a lot of years we never saw the errata. And part of that comes from the fact that they didn't have the ability to update it and post it somewhere for you to download. Because back in the day, when I was, dinosaurs roamed the earth back then, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, we had computers, and there were bulletin boards, but there wasn't an internet, at least not an open internet that everybody could access. And so there was no real way to put up that information for you to access. So we see more errata today than we ever saw before. And usually we just house ruled it when we realized it was something that was wrong and corrected it. No big deal. Shadowrun 6E should have been a little bit better edited. So far, I haven't noticed anything in these games that stand out, but I won't when I'm actually reading them. I will when I'm actually sitting down to play. That's how I find errors in my own work sometimes, or having somebody else take my game and run it for me. I see where they have arguments and they're like, we don't think this is what you intended to do. And I play, and I'm like, oh yeah, I see now. Because as a GM, I adjust things a little bit. I always do, whether it's a rule system somebody else's or my rule system. I have a habit to make it work the way it's intended rather than the way it's explicitly written. Though with my games, generally speaking, they're explicitly written after I've play tested them and fixed all that stuff. Um, so, which is one reason I'm not fast at turning stuff over. There's a reason why it's been 12 years since High Valley. There's a reason why it's been much longer since Hearts and Souls First Edition, and why Hearts and Souls Second Edition has taken so long. It's because I'm trying to make sure all of this works and add some new stuff that I run into that I think are good ways of handling things. Like stress in Hearts and Souls. I think there's a good way to still keep it what it is and also make it work a little bit better. Anyway, peace, good gaming. I love you guys, gamers. You're not perfect. but you do make it. So keep at it. Keep trying to make a difference in the world. Be hopeful, be strong, be well.